Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Brian Keane. Over the past 7 years, Brian has gone from working full-time as a school teacher to one of Ireland and the UK's leading thought leaders on all things health, fitness, and nutrition. Brian is the author of 2 bestsellers, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset. On top of his ever-growing social media platforms with over 500,000 followers, he also hosts one of the world's top health podcasts, which is regularly featured #1 on the iTunes health charts. He has spoken at major wellness events around the world, such as WellFast Ireland, MeFit Dubai, and was a keynote speaker at Google HQ in Dublin for their 2018 wellness event. Among his many fitness and athletic achievements, Brian has transitioned from a professional fitness model to ultra endurance athlete, running through the Sahara, the Arctic, and completing a 100-mile ultra marathon. As you can imagine, the conversation today was off the charts, motivational, tips on your mindset to accomplish any goal, getting over fear and how it's standing in our way, not running past our purpose and our destiny, getting a clue, making sure we don't miss it, and what our 97-year-old self would say about the life we're living. Are we living full out, being true to ourselves and our purpose? This was so good today, you guys. It was a treat. And of course, like-minded people ignite, and we brought the fire today, the motivational, inspirational fire. And what would you expect from somebody with all of those accolades that ran the Sahara, the Arctic, and 100-mile ultra marathon? He is here live and in person to bring the fire today. So without further ado, let's tune into this episode with Brian. I am so excited to welcome Brian Keane to the Sisterhood of Sweat today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda. I am so excited to chat. Again, I know what you've been doing with the Sisterhood of Sweat, and I'm really looking forward to just diving deep on a couple of topics today.
Perfect. I love it when my guests go and check out everything about the show, because it shows that you're genuinely interested in what you do and who you're speaking with. And we have an audience full of strong, inspired, motivated, powerful women out there. What are you going to bring to us today?
Oh, I'm looking forward to bringing the energy. If I can match what you do, Linda, because when we were chatting and going through a little bit of your background, because I know you did the WBFF, the World in 2018, you did the Spartan races, and I was the same. I competed in the WBFF. I've done Spartan Beast, and now I kind of do ultras and different ultra marathons and things along those lines. So if anything I can bring, it's going to be to try and match your energy today.
I love it. I love it. It's a kindred spirit, like you said before we started. And you didn't get there doing all those things by accident. You had to have a little bit of mindset going on to get through a beast, right? What was your mindset deciding to sign up for a beast, first of all? And what was your mindset to get through it?
So I've had a kind of a funny enough adventure history when it comes to the race choices that I've done. So I did the Spartan Beast back in 2012, when I was working full-time as an elementary school teacher. So before I made the jump into the fitness industry, I was an elementary school teacher for 4 years. That was like my quote unquote real job, the go to college, go to university, get a degree, get a job. And I felt very unfulfilled in that area of my life because I spent years studying and getting the qualifications to become a teacher. And then 2 hours into my first teaching day, I was like, this isn't what I want to do. So I started to look outside for fulfillment in other areas. And that's what led me down to the Spartan race. I did Tough Mudder first, and then I did the Spartan Beast. And it was really just to, again, running is not really my background. It was just to try and give me a feeling of fulfillment in an area of life that was outside of my job. I was kind of disconnected from what I was doing. I didn't love my job as a teacher, but I went into the Spartan race. I did the Beast, and that kind of set off a little bit of a love for nearly testing myself physically and mentally. And over the years, I transitioned out, not totally dissimilar to you, Linda, where I went into the world of competing. I did my first show, which was the Miami Pro in 2014. I then went on to the WBFF Worlds in 2015 in Vegas. And then I transitioned out of that a year later into the world of endurance. So I did Marathon des Sables in 2018, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. But
what is it again?
Marathon des Sables. So it's 6 back-to-back marathons through the Sahara Desert in Morocco.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was the most unbelievable experience of my life. Now, it was crazy hard because it's self-sufficient. So you have to pack all your food, all your equipment, everything on your back. And you literally run with, all the other people who have decided they're going to run 6 back-to-back marathons through the Sahara, and you have nothing on you. The only thing they give you is water, at checkpoints. Everything else is survival, your own self-survival. So you need like a venom pump within arm's reach at all times in case you get bitten by a snake, and you just have to kind of manage out what happens. We got hit by a sandstorm one day, our tent got blown away another night. There was just crazy things happening, and it kind of got me addicted to that world in terms of mentally challenging myself and physically challenging myself. Then the following year, 2019, I ran through the Arctic. So we went up to the top tip of Sweden and ran 230 kilometers through the Arctic Circle line, which was the most intense thing I've ever done in my life. Whatever about the Sahara, the Arctic is the most unforgiving place on the planet when it comes to frostbite and potential hypothermia and all these crazy things that can go wrong. And a lot of that over the years has just been down to developing my mindset. You speak this with your audience, know the goal you're going after. You're talking about empowerment and mindset and building confidence, a big area that you speak about. And for me, it was my version of that. What can I do that can potentially help me build my confidence over time? And it started with Tough Mudder and Spartan, and then it built over the course of 7, 8, 9, 10 years just to try and get to the point where I felt mentally strong enough to do these things. Now, it's relative. For somebody else, that's squatting 2 plates each side, in terms of 20-pound plates. For somebody else, it's running a 5-kilometer or a 5-mile run. For somebody else, it's stepping up on stage or getting ready for a photo shoot, something that you've loads of experience with. So it's so relative in terms of what the goal is, in terms of what you need to do with your mindset in order to hit that goal. But I think as someone that's gone through it, I can speak to it. So hopefully we can kind of go a little bit deeper, potentially help some people who are struggling in that area, whether it's a fat loss goal, weight loss goal, fitness goal, nutrition goal, whatever it is that someone's looking to do, that all that mindset can be developed. Like it's built. You're not born with that. You build it over time by getting better with self-discipline and putting a lot of effort into your habits and making sure that you're forming good habits and then becoming a slave to them and just doing that consistently over time.
Don't you think like signing up for something like that and doing it and accomplishing it, that it literally brings you more alive because you're facing kind of death, right? In a way, you're kind of like, you feel more alive than you ever felt before.
It's unbelievable. One of the things, Linda, that I got when I came back from the Sahara in particular was simple life pleasures that I never really thought about before. Now, I had this when I competed, don't get me wrong, and I know you probably the same, that when you're competing and dieting really hard, a bowl of oats in the morning feels like a treat. You're like a scoop of chocolate protein, and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. So it gets you excited about little things. But when I was in the Sahara, to tell you a story, on night 3, so we were after running 3 marathons, and there was a storm. So a sandstorm, for anyone unfamiliar with that, is as it sounds, it's a storm, but it's all sand. Now it completely, you need to wrap up and you can't see anything because the sand will just smash into your face. So on night 3, we got to the point where there was a warning. We heard there was going to be a sandstorm. You can kind of hear it rumbling in the background. So you basically have to batten down on everything. So we grabbed, I was literally in my sleeping bag. There was 5 men in a tent out in the middle of the Sahara. And we had to jump on our sleeping bags or into our sleeping bags, jump on our backpacks that had all our food so it didn't get blown away. And I could hear this storm as I was wrapping up and pulling the string of my sleeping bag tighter. So if you've ever seen South Park, like Kinney in South Park, like that's how it was. It was just pulling it so that nothing could get in. And there was a guy beside me who I'd been running with, and I heard a massive deathly scream. And I was like, oh my God, what's after happening? And with the tents in the Sahara, they have these poles, like steel poles that you stick down, 4 on each side, on each corner. And one of them had came up through the ground with the wind, and it smashed through his sleeping bag and through his hand. And all I could hear was this deathly scream behind me. He's like, oh my God. Like, I won't go into the explicits, but he was swearing, and I was like, oh my God, he's dead. Like something bad has happened. And I remember sitting there, lying there in the Sahara going, if this something else comes out of the ground and hits me in the head, I was like, I'm dead. I'm like, it's all over. I'm like, this is going through his hand. If this hits me in the head, I'm dead. So it was just a case of, ignorance is bliss, going, it won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. And after about probably what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 10 or 15 minutes, the storm passed over us, pulled out the sleeping bag, saw Johnny, who was beside me, was looking at his hand. It was just cut. It was nothing, hadn't gone through it, but had, done pretty bad damage. And the first night I got home, back into a hotel. So when you run the 6 back-to-back marathons, we went to a hotel before we flew home back to Ireland. And I was like 4 walls and a roof. I was like, I'm so grateful for 4 walls and a roof off the back of that experience. And I don't know about you, Linda, but I've been 30,
I wanted to kiss the ground after that beast.
Yeah.
When I was done.
It's exactly like you've been there with the beast, you've been there with shows, you've been there with other things. And I think that one of the definitely misconceptions I had, I'm not sure if you've ever had this, Linda, so I'd be curious to see, but I started to realize that when I started to do difficult things, it made my life feel easier. And it felt like such a paradox. Like, have you been in that position? Yeah, like it's such a paradox where you think hard things, hard life, but it's not. It's hard things makes life feel easier because you're more grateful for these small things that you once took for granted. And I think that message, which again, you don't need to go through the Sahara, you don't need to do a beast probably to get it. You can get it from other things for sure. But it's such an interesting topic. I know you, as you said, you've experienced it as well. But I think that alone brings you back to these challenges, whatever it is, because it just makes you happier in your everyday life. And the normal anxieties that can pull your mind in different directions, they just don't seem to pull as bad.
Yeah, it boosts your confidence. And, whenever you do something hard, you realize you can do hard things. I literally have choose your heart up on my wall at my gym, but I was thinking you can do hard things. I say that so often to the ladies in the studio because I think we've had this cushy life that's it's pretty cushy. You realize that when you're, doing a Navy SEAL obstacle course, like I've taken my boot camp on many times, or you're doing a beast, or like you did the desert and the Arctic. You realize you do live a pretty cushy life. And when you push yourself to do these things you're afraid of, to do these hard things, it does translate into your everyday life. So 100%. Now, as far as the Arctic goes, the closest I can say I've come is I am doing 75 hard and I'm on the second phase and I'm doing 5-minute cold showers.
Amazing. I mean, it's all relative though. It's relative. That's how it starts. I was like, this time next year, you'd be like, I'll go to the Arctic. No, I'm joking. But it's how it starts.
But that's where you start. You do something like that. And it probably sounds bizarre. Like, Linda, why are you taking a 5-minute cold shower when you have perfectly warm water? But it actually, there's science behind it. And it's very good for your recovery. It's very good for you. And there's so much behind it. But it's like when I went to the Grand Canyon, and I'm definitely afraid of heights, not anymore, but at the time. And I remember I talked my whole family into it, and we are on the skywalk. I mean, I had to push to get everybody out there, and I am against the wall like a fly because I am scared to death. Like I am like scared and I can't make myself, I asked her, is there earthquakes here? And she's like, yes, every day. And I'm like, oh, thanks for that. And then I realized, well, if there's going to be an earthquake and I could possibly die, how do I want to go? I want to go going for it. I don't want to go standing against the wall, afraid to experience what I came here for and afraid to experience life. So I did. I got out, I got my selfie, I got my proof, right? And then I went right back to the wall. And then I had to talk to myself. I was like, you know what, Linda, if you could do this, like you tell everyone else, face your fear, you could go to new heights. If you could just face these fears right now, it's going to take you to new heights, because when you come up with a fear that you're as scared as this, you're going to break through it. So I literally walked the perimeter. I put my face down to the glass at the end and looked straight to the sheer bottom. And after that, I was over it. And it did help me. It helped me face other fears in my life that were holding me back.
I love that. Like I speak about that in the second book, Rewire Your Mindset, that you use past experiences when you were afraid to deal with fears that are in the present or coming up in the future. And that's a perfect example of it. Like you remember the example I use, and this is one that I think everyone can connect with, because I talk about the Sahara, the Arctic. People are like, that's way over here, I'm never going to do that. But when it comes to fear, I tell people, well, think about the first time that you kissed a guy or a girl. I'm like, that was the biggest deal ever. Like you were terrified. I don't know about you, Linda, but like I was like sweaty palms. I was 11, she was 12. I was like, oh my God, I'm so afraid right now. And now it's just, you take it for granted. Like, so fear is relative based on how you feel and based on your experience at the time. And because you've exposed yourself to it, in that case, you know, over the years, in the case of kissing girls or kissing guys based on preference, etc., it's not a fear anymore. And that's how most fears are. Similar to your heights, the more exposure you become grounded in that, and you use that anchor to be like, well, I felt this way before and I was afraid before and I powered through and I was fine and things were okay. And you're separating real fears from perceived fears, which I think is really important. You know, some fears are, you know, if there's an earthquake, legit fear, you know, same as I could get bit by a snake in the Sahara, legit fear. You know, speaking in front of people and feeling anxious or giving that presentation at work, like they're perceived fears. They're not real. You know, they're your mind has made them more than what they are. And I think separating those two things and then anchoring that previous fear to help you deal with this current one, assuming it's a perceived fear, is very important and a very useful mindset tool that you can use to help you, you know, face anything that happens in everyday life.
Yeah, because it's like when you have a fear, it feels so real because what you're telling yourself in your mind is all your mind can see. And it feels like it's real, but it's false evidence appearing real, just like they say. And so like when you realize, when you face down these giants of fear and you actually push through the fear, what's on the other side is what you wanted all along. And you were holding yourself back because you were paralyzed with the fear. But once you realize these things, like I was scared to death when I opened my first studio. And then when I expanded, I was afraid. And now I'm expanded again during a pandemic. I was afraid. And each time you do it, you're like, oh, what?
Yeah, what was I afraid of?
Like, this is awesome. Like,
yeah.
Right. And so like the gift is in when you push past the fear, you realize those things that you were so afraid of were really not as hard as you thought. And you could do it, and you could kick it to town all day long, and you could do it so well. And so probably you're not dreaming big enough.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like, I think that if your dreams don't scare you a little bit, you're not setting them big enough for sure.
Yeah. And I'm a visionary. I'm very futuristic. So like when I'm in my studio today, I was like getting like, I want to call it downloads, but like I was just getting the vision of what the studio is becoming and what my vision is for the Sisterhood of Sweat and where it's going. And the more you live out your dreams, the more you become inspired to do more and more versus sitting back powering like a fly against the wall, like I was doing, at the Grand Canyon.
It's so true. Like one of the things I talk about with my girls as well, I'm like, become your own hero. I'm like, who do you want to become? Like, what does your future self look like? What do you want to aspire to in 5 years, 10 years, and then become your own hero? I'm like, I love Marvel movies and the superhero movies, but I'm like, Iron Man or Captain America aren't coming to save you. I'm like, you have to be your own hero. So it starts with, well, what do you want your life to look like in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I know you've done this better than anyone, Linda, with, the business and with the competing and with Spartan and with everything that you've done. It's like, decide, well, who do you want to be? And then you start taking daily action steps to help you get there. And you're constantly striving towards that future self of becoming your own hero. I think that mindset shift can help so many people. So you can look at you can look at me, you can look at other people online and definitely take inspiration if it's people have achieved something that you want to achieve. But at the end of the day, it has to come back to you, comparison against yourself. And are you moving forward? But it first comes with a decision on who you want to be. You did that with the studio, with the expansions. You've done it with, as I mentioned, the competing. It's very similar. You decide how you want to look on stage, and then you take the daily action steps to help you get there. And business is exactly the same. Fitness is exactly the same. And I think you can apply that into all areas of life as well.
Yeah. And we can't do all of those things at once, right? You have to really focus in, like when you're in the desert, like you had to focus fully on that race. Like you weren't doing a million other things. And I think that people need to recognize there's a time for everything, and really, having that 5-year plan, and then having that, 12-month, 6-month, like knowing what your main things are, having clarity on what your goals are, and do these things work together, and like not looking to the left and the right about what Joe Blow or Susie Q are doing, but like not getting distracted is what I'm saying, is really honing in on what it is you want, what is the impact you want to bring, and who do you want to serve.
I'm just getting clear on that. As you said, clarity is power. And the analogy that I'll use for people is, like, if you picture driving down a motorway at 100 miles an hour, I'm like, what's the quickest way you're going to crash? I'm like, you look to your right or you look to your left. I'm like, if you're going 100 miles an hour in a direction towards what you want to go to, you're going to crash if you look left or right. And that's the equivalent to looking what somebody else is doing. So get clear on your journey. Where are you going? And then go full steam ahead with it.
I got a tweetable for you. Looking at what somebody else is doing is taking your eyes off your goals.
Love it. It's so true, but it's so true. Like, and I'm not sure if it's happened to you, Linda, but it's happened to me in the past where I've taken my eye off it because I'm too worried, and I go into what I call comparison syndrome, where I'm like, oh, in the case of, the girls I work with, where they're comparing themselves against Instagram influencers or fitness models, or when they're on a weight loss journey. And that can be brilliant, as I mentioned earlier, for inspiration. You can look at what you're doing and what I'm doing, what other people are doing, and get inspired by that and motivated by that. But if it comes at the cost of unrealistic expectations based on your journey, if you have, 50 pounds to lose or 20 pounds to lose, it's probably not an ideal comparison. But how are you getting on in your journey? Are you improving? Are you losing weight? Are you getting fitter? Are you getting stronger? And then keeping that the focus, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times that comparison is very self-defeating, and not just comparing myself to, I turned 59 in September.
You look amazing. Oh my God. Like I saw that and I'm like, oh, I just have to say, you look amazing.
Thanks. I mean, it's just, being alive and feeling, fueling yourself with good food, good energy, good people, and good goals, right? Otherwise, you're not as fully alive. And I think that's what keeps you young, is having vision and dreams and passions, right? So like what I was saying is, I'm 59, if I'm comparing myself to 20-year-olds, like, and saying I need to be like that, instead of just being my best at 59, whatever that is, whatever that version is, whatever the best self I can bring to the game is, that is vibrance, right? But not
I have a question for you, Linda. Sorry, now I know I don't mean to cut across, and I know that we're talking on this side, but how do you find comparing yourself against your younger self? So say your 40-year-old self, your 45-year-old self. Talk to me about that. I'm
You
curious.
just took my words right out of my mouth. That's where I was going with this. Is don't compare yourself against others, and also don't compare yourself against your younger self, your non-injured self. You know, stop doing that, because what that does is it holds you back and it keeps you stuck in the past. So what you have to do, because I've had some really horrific injuries over the last 3 years, and now I'm bouncing back. And what I had to do was cut that loose, move on, have new dreams, new vision, and stop the old comparing to when I stepped on stage at, the WBFF or Fitness America and had 6-pack abs. I have to say, okay, where are we right now? And what is my vision for the future? That was all cool, but something else could be equally cool. And that's what I've been doing. And I set new goals for myself that have me motivating my socks off. And then it opened another thing where, I started dreaming about, oh my God, I haven't had a retreat or a boot camp getaway in a while. And I'm like, oh, what could that look like? What have I always wanted to do? And then I'm like, oh my God, this is like going to be an experience of a lifetime, So that's what you do. You stop tying yourself to the old you.
I love that. I think it connects with me as well on a very deep level, that sometimes you're shifting priorities based on circumstance. If you get injured, it's probably not the best time to get into the best shape of your life, but you probably can focus on your business or your family or your mental health or,
Other
whatever your
coping
other goal is.
mechanisms.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Because I think I realized too that my coping mechanism was the fitness, the running, all of the things. And I found I was more than just my body, and that I had a whole nother avenue to myself that I didn't even know. Like I started public speaking, I started my podcast. I wrote books, you know what I'm saying? Like I had this other side. And if you only ever focus on one side, you're missing a lot.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, it's the same as if you've got a garden and a load of plants. Whatever one you water the most is the one that's going to grow, which is fine if you want one really, really nice flower, i.e. to be in great shape. But you got to give it across other things if you want a more balanced lifestyle as well.
Yeah, I think actually I would have missed out on my purpose too. I was running past it, and I can compare that to a Navy obstacle course where we had this GPS thing where we had to find the next clue. And sometimes it was climbing up a mountain, hanging off on a rope, and your partners have your butt like, because you're like going to fall and they're like pushing you up. And like, I just remember like going up this like 400-meter like hill, running. They're like, Linda, like I kept running past the box, okay, where I needed to get the clue. And so like, hello, that could be for life. Are you doing something that's making you run past what get a clue what God has for you or what your purpose is? Sometimes we are, because we're stuck in what we always done, and we can't get out of our own way.
That's such, as you said, that's such a metaphor. Like the metaphor I've always used is, is your ladder up against the right wall. Like when to kind of tie, it's a kind of a different story. But back when I mentioned when I was teaching, I spent 4 years in undergraduate degree, a year postgraduate, and then became an elementary school teacher. And then 2 hours into my first teaching job, I was like, oh my God, this isn't what I want to do. And the analogy I used, not dissimilar to running past the clue, was it felt like I was climbing a ladder and then I got to the top and it was up against the wrong wall. And that's a very disheartening feeling. I think we've all felt that in some capacity, whether in fitness, a relationship, a job. And it comes down with the clarity. If you're not checking in regularly with, have I ran past the clue or is my ladder up against the wrong wall? It's so easy to get led astray in whatever it is that you're doing. So I think checking in regularly is key as well.
Yeah, and I'm getting ready to do a meditation challenge with Todd Durkin that he has free. You guys can check that out. He has a podcast called Impact, and Coach Todd Durkin has this meditation challenge. And they developed it. It's like a 21 day, but why I'm bringing that up, in case you want to hop on it, is the meditation is what brings you to center yourself and have the clarity so that you really know what you're all about. So you're not running past what your purpose is, because so easily we can all do that because we're used to pushing through everything, and you don't need to push through everything. Sometimes you need to stop, look, and listen.
It's so true. Like, I think pushing through is a skill, like it's a tool in your toolbox, but like, you know, it's like a hammer, you know.
I didn't know how to turn it off.
Yeah, yeah, and you and me both. Like, I think a lot of type A personalities tend to default to that. You tend to see that with a lot of fitness people, competitors, entrepreneurs. They're very type A, go, 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 go. Don't know how to slow down. What's the next thing? Never been content in what you achieve. It's like, okay, that's great. I've done that. What's next? And meditating or self-reflection or journaling or therapy or whatever means that you get there, whatever tool you use, is so key. Because otherwise you just, you know, I love the old analogy, when you stop chasing the wrong things, you give the right things a chance to catch up. But you can at least slow down and realize, well, actually, what do I want? What do I want my romantic life to look like? What do I want my marriage or relationship to look like? What do I want my fitness to look like? What do I want my business to look like? And if you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, I know we used the analogy earlier about going 100 miles an hour on the motorway, which is useful at times, but sometimes you need to just stop, pull over to the side of the road and ask, well, is this actually where I want to go? You know, it's great if you want to go from, it's great if you want to go from New York to Vegas and you're clear on your goal. You can do that drive cross country. But if you're heading down to Georgia or Alabama, you're on the wrong path. So you need to course correct.
Yes.
So checking in regularly, I think, allows you to do that.
I love that. I love that. And you can always turn around. You don't want to keep going the wrong direction. You might as well just do a U-turn and get back on track with what it is you want and you feel is for you in your heart. And so that is such a good analogy, though, the pushing through, because during the beast or during like anything hard I've done, which I've done a lot of crazy things. I mean, I think my daughter told me I'm an adrenaline junkie. And so I have to say, I get thrills out of doing these things, and it keeps me feeling vibrant is all I can think. But like, if you're getting to the point where, you know, during a beast, what do you say to yourself to get through? I was dramatic. I would be like saying to myself, I'll rest when I'm dead. You know, like, I mean, what do you say to yourself? What are your mantras when you are pushing through something? And then sometimes then you have to say to yourself, maybe like everything is not where I have to just push through. And maybe sometimes I can just, like, again, stop, look, and listen. So what were your mantras when you were in the Sahara Desert? What kind of things did you say to yourself? I'm just curious.
I had two different ones, very much based on my experiences. With the Sahara, it was as simple as keep putting one foot in front of the other. My mantra was just one foot in front of the other, one foot, next step, next step, next step, which it was quite useful when I came back, because you can break down the biggest goals that you set for yourself into smaller component parts, and it effectively is just a step-by-step process for the most part. You know, I work with people who have lost 100 pounds. I've worked with people who have ran ultras similar to me. I don't specialize in that, but I'll help people in any way that I can. And I tell them the same thing. You're breaking it down into a step-by-step process. And that's where your mindset needs to focus. For the Arctic, it was a little bit different. About 86 kilometers from the end in the Arctic, I tore my Achilles. So my Achilles tendon, for anyone unfamiliar, is just, it's above your calf, or below your calf, kind of above your heel. Achilles heel is what people are familiar with. But I tore that, and it felt, Linda, for the first 20 kilometers of that 86, like somebody was shooting me with a shotgun every time I put my foot down. That's what a torn Achilles feels like.
Oh my gosh, that takes forever to heal.
Yeah, it put me out for 6 months when I got home. But when I was there, and there was one of the ways that running through the Arctic work is there's a link in with the local indigenous tribe. So they set up little teepees every 15, 20 kilometers. It's really cool. And they'll cut a hole in the ice. They'll boil water because obviously the water freezes in the Arctic. So they'll boil water for you. You can come in, and they're the indigenous local Sami tribe, and they'll fill up your water bottle when you come through. And there was a medic that checked me 86 kilometers, and she said, look, your Achilles is torn. It could rupture. She was like, if it ruptures, you're going to have to be flown out of here in a helicopter. And I had a mindset and decision that I made on the front end. And it sounds a little bit silly when I say it now, as somebody that has a family, has a daughter, has, you know, a lot of things going on. My mindset going to the Arctic, very similar to the Sahara, was I'm either finishing the race or I'm going to be taken out in a helicopter. I'm like, there's no plan B. And that was partly down to self-awareness on my part, because I bottled it a lot in earlier parts of my life where I pulled out of races. I didn't finish marathons. I didn't finish races because I'm like, oh, this is too hard. I'm going to stop. So my way around that is I can't give myself a plan B. I can't give myself an out because I normally take it. And the Arctic is where I had that philosophy, or where I had to put that philosophy into practice. And my mantra there was, pain is temporary. I'm like, at some point, this isn't going to hurt. At some point, my Achilles isn't going to feel like someone's shooting me with a gun every time I step. At some point, it's not going to be minus 38 degrees. At some point, I'm going to be home. I'm going to be fully fed. It's going to be a warm house. And then I'm going to have to come to a realization that, did I tap out of a race because, you know, I'd flown up to the Arctic? It was the goal that I'd been working towards for a year prior to that. And I was going to be sitting at home 6, 12, 18 months time. And I'm either going to be there by myself, or sitting with my daughter, or sitting with my partner, or sitting with a friend, and be like, I should have finished that. I should have kept going and see what would happen. And I kept repeating to myself, pain is temporary, pain is temporary, pain is temporary. This will go away. At some point, this will go away. And that metaphor, I think it's a metaphor for everything. Like, I came back from the Arctic, Linda, and I felt like I could handle any pain, physical, emotional, just because my relationship with pain completely changed. Like, I pushed myself to a point way past where I thought I could. And the pain did go away. Now it put me out for 6 months after, took me closer to a year before I was running back at normal pace. But I did it. I got to the end. I got to the finish line. I finished it. And now I have that memory. I have that experience. I have that confidence. I have that, everything that came with that. And I think it's relative, because everybody has been through pain. You've been through it with Spartan. You've been through it on preps, been through it in your personal life. Like, nobody gets through life unscathed when it comes to dealing with pain, whether it's losing a job or a relationship or losing a loved one. Like, it happens to us. It's the way life is. And it's about how you react to it. You know, one of my mentors used to always tell me that, you know, 90% of life, or 10% of life, is what happens to you. 90% is how you react to it. And that was my mantra going through the Arctic. And it's something I still use to this day. If I'm going through a tough time, I tell myself, this will pass. You know, the old Winston Churchill quote that, if you're going through hell, keep going. Like, it will pass.
100%. That's one of my favorite quotes. Yes.
And it's so true. And I think, for anyone listening who's in that point where they're struggling with something right now, it will pass. And we can get so lost, you know, the forest amongst the trees, when we're in the middle of it. So just remind yourself, take yourself out of it and go, at some point, it's not going to be as painful. At some point, I'm not going to hurt as much in 99 out of 100 cases. And you just repeat that. And that was the mantra I used in the Arctic.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And, you know, you're just taking me back. What you're saying to me is what I learned when I fully blew my hamstring the night before I was to fly. I mean, it was the night I was supposed to fly out the next morning for a fitness routine, like competing, you know, like, which is like gymnastic type. And I waited until 1:30 in the emergency room, and they never came back with my results. So when I got up the next day, I'm like, yeah, I'm having a little trouble walking, but hey, I'm signed up for fitness and bikini, so I can at least do the bikini. I'm going to go. I'm going to see what I can do. And then I'm going to get a hold of these people and be like, okay, what's the prognosis? And I didn't know it was fully blown, like completely from the pelvis with bone fragments, or I wouldn't have competed. I know I wouldn't have, but I knew I was coming to the end of that era of like flying across the stage. And so I wanted to go out with a bang. So I guess I
Literally in
did.
this
I
case,
did. I
yeah.
did. But I competed. I take it back about the cold shower. The coldest thing was cryotherapy, which I did I had like 2 days before we were walking on the stage and doing that. And so I went to cryotherapy, and it was my game changer because it makes you feel like you're not injured. So
Mm.
I competed with a fully blown hamstring, and I placed third in the top five, like, and so that's probably in open fitness, 18 years on up. So I was like, okay, um, I don't know what I would have gotten if I wouldn't have done this to my hamstring, but this is the highest, I've won many shows, but this is the highest I've ever done in a national show. So I'm going to walk away proud. I used my mindset. I listened to Oprah. I listened to Joel Osteen. I was listening to Todd Durkin to get through it, because it was all mindset. It was never about my body. It was all about what's going on between the two ears, is what I discovered.
Yeah, and don't let your biggest enemy live between your two ears.
And that's what you did. You used your mindset, because how do you get through that race with a completely torn Achilles? It is not your body, it is your mind.
And it's amazing, and you know this exactly with the blown hamstring. Your mind, if you can get that right, the body will follow. And I think that works for a physical case here. Now, I'm also the first one to say, asterisk, if that was a local half marathon, I'm not finishing the race. I'm pulling out and going, right, I need to rest my Achilles. The reason I was able to push through, very similar, I would imagine, Linda, to your case, was this was the goal I was working for. I had my why, I had my reason. We weren't necessarily being stupid, doing things on an injury. Like, I know it can seem like that from the outside, but if you have your why and you know your reason for doing it, it takes nearly hell or high water to stop you if you can get your mindset right, but at the end of the day, at the flip side, don't be silly. Like, if it was a half marathon or a 10K, or if you were doing just like a local show to prepare, you probably wouldn't have done it. You'd have scaled back and go, well, the goal is actually the international show across the state, or, in my case, the Arctic. So you're applying different tools based on the context. So I think it's important for people to know that as well. But really, once your mindset decides, and if you can develop that, which I think you can, I wrote the books that I write, the content I do, the podcasts are all about my journey in talking about, well, look, I wasn't like this, and I built this mindset in order to do it. And it's relative. As I said, somebody else's Arctic is losing 10 pounds. Somebody else's Sahara is getting ready for a fitness show. Somebody else's 100-mile ultramarathon is preparing for a photo shoot. Like, there's loads of different goals where it spans. You work, you're empowering women of all shapes and sizes to, become their best version of themselves. And you can develop your mindset to help regardless of the goal. All you're doing is just channeling that energy in a different direction.
And I think, like, it's the first time I really felt like I was totally in the zone. Like, I didn't care, I've suffered from people pleasing in the past, and I didn't care what this person thought, that person thought. It was so focused just on that goal, and I just felt so in the zone that I didn't even feel my hamstring when I competed on the stage, and nobody could tell that I completely tore it. I think I only modified one move. So I don't know, like, if that is like, supposed to be humanly possible, but with a mindset, it was possible.
It overrides, like, your mindset can override your physiology. Like, I have a nutrition background, strength and conditioning background, sports physiology background outside of when I was teaching. And these things fall outside of that. Yeah. Like, if I was hearing that story from anybody else, with your hamstring, with my Achilles, I'm like, well, your body stops. Like, it's physiology, right. It's torn, you can't move.
Yeah.
But then when you experience it, it's different. So there's something else out there that we're tapping into, other people can tap into, that is beyond the realm of sports science, that falls into whatever's happening in the body. Because as I said to you, like, I have a picture on my Instagram, Linda, when my Achilles went first, for the first 20 kilometers, the Arctic is kind of this Goldilocks zone where you can't go too fast because if you sweat, you can get hypothermia, but you can't go too slow because you can get frostbite.
So you're going to freeze to death.
You can freeze.
Yeah.
So I was in this Goldilocks zone. When I was moving, I was going so slow that my eyelids froze over. Like I forgot that you obviously just so much water in your eyes, and they froze. I have a picture on my Instagram of just my eyelids completely frozen over. And after that 20K, I had made the decision, I'm finishing this. I'm like, I'm going to keep going. And I won't say the pain went away, similar to, I know it did with your hamstring. It was there, but it was a nag. Like it was a nagging. It's like, this thing is here, but it's not stopping me. And I can't explain that no more than your hamstring.
I know, but it's just like that thing. You got in the zone, and you, your will and your mindset is what took over. And so I think when you're going through anything hard, it helps to realize that you have that superpower within you to do great things, regardless of what your body is doing. And so I just think it's so cool that you did all of these races, and you've written this book called The Fitness Mindset. So how perfect that we're talking about your mindset. But like for somebody out there that totally just thinks we're crazy and they can't relate to what we're talking about today, and they're like, what is wrong with you people? But you have goals that to you right now maybe seem hard, like the Sahara Desert, or like you're not going to get on the stage at 59 and do crazy things. But you want to be in shape and feel good in your body. And maybe it's been a while since you have, and you've gained weight and you're not feeling great. Just know that you could tap into these powers of like your will and your mindset. What are 3 tips that you can give our audience today to tap into this in this fitness mindset?
Probably the 3 most important things that have crossover from fitness to all other areas of life is one that we've touched on already, which I'll touch briefly on, is getting super clear on the end goal. I think at the end of the day, once you have that clarity on what you're looking to do, everything else can fall into place. Whether it's, you mentioned God earlier, the universe, whether it's reticular activation system, your brain's internal GPS, if you're going to cognitive neuroscience, there's lots of different words you can put on that where things start to become more open. The analogy I use is if you walk into a party, Linda, and you see there's 100 people in the room and there's another girl in there with the same dress, the first thing you notice is the dress. I'm like, well, there was 100 other people, but you noticed the dress because you have that same one on. Like, that's your reticular activation system. That's your brain's internal GPS focusing and telling you what you should focus on. It happens with people in the gym all the time. I'm sure you've seen this, where someone that will decide to get on a weight loss journey will start to see personal trainers everywhere and gyms everywhere. They were always there, but you aren't focusing on them. So getting clear on your end goal first and foremost. I'm a believer in writing them in the first person and putting them somewhere you can see them so that you can start to kind of tap into that reticular activation system. I think that's really helpful. That's number 1. The second thing is realize that failure isn't a thing that you need to self-identify with, and it's feedback, and it's not a bad thing. And a lot of people, myself included, in a past self, younger self, had a negative association with failure. One, I either identified too much with it and didn't distinguish that the things I do were failures versus I'm a failure. And those 2 things were kind of married together. But I also thought it was a bad thing and an end result that this is done. And I didn't realize that failure is feedback. Everything that you've done that didn't work up until now is feedback on how you can improve going forward. Every failed diet, every bad relationship, every job you didn't like, it's failure. It's feedback to help you move forward and make decisions going forward. And the last thing then is changing your relationship with fear. I think we touched on the difference between perceived fear and real fear earlier on. And if you struggle with that area, you touched on it earlier, very similar quote to, behind every fear is the person you want to be. But if you can change your relationship with fear and start to anchor times in the past when you felt afraid, and you utilize that going forward to help you manage the fears, because they don't go away. One of the biggest misconceptions people have, myself included, before I wrote my second book, was that people get better with handling fear and that some people aren't afraid of things. That's not what happens. And you know this, you just get better at managing it. The fears become less and less, and they stop holding you back. You tend to feel the fear and do it anyways. That's the only difference. You know, when I think of my younger self to now, when I think of people I've worked with, when you think of people you've been, you know, speaking to on the podcast, Linda, yourself, clients, the only difference between their relationship with fear is how they manage it now. They have more tools in their toolkit that they can use to move through it. So I think if you can get clear on the goal you're looking to do, you use failure as feedback, and you change your relationship with fear, you're going to have a very happy and successful life in whatever it is you decide to do.
So good. So good. What is the impact you are hoping to leave in the world?
Oh, that's a great question. It's changed. It's changed, if I'm being honest, because I had a mindset when I wrote my first book, The Fitness Mindset, and the second book, Rewire Your Mindset. They're two very different books. The first book was working off helping people get in shape and using the mindset to keep it. It was things my clients were struggling with. Rewire Your Mindset, my second book, is my legacy book. Like, that's the book that I felt I couldn't die with it inside me. And once I got that out, my mindset had always been, and my philosophy was always, I want the world to be a little bit better because I was here. But it shifted in recent years, and it's kind of evolved into, I want my gravestone or my tombstone to read, you know, he loved his family and his family loved him. And it's done a shift in another direction. If you ask me in 5-10 years, it might do another one, I don't know. But focusing on that, I work off what I call the 97-year-old rule. You know, what would your 97-year-old self on your deathbed regret the most? And what does that tombstone, what does that gravestone, what do you want it to read? And at the minute, that's what I wanted to read. It probably says more on where my priorities are right now. And the things
Your priorities shift for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's the answer where it is now. And I think asking that question is useful, but also it's the power of questions, because you can ask the same question regularly and get different answers. You know, that question that I come back to, what would my 97-year-old regret? Or what do I want on my headstone? What do I want on my tombstone? Those answers change. So I think they're good questions that you can come back to regularly if needed.
And I do love that. I love that a lot. And I think just when I think about it, I'm like, my 97-year-old self would be that I don't want to be living in regret that I didn't go for it. So like, I want to be all in and just go for it all the way. So I can look back and have these awesome experiences and memories and know that I didn't sit back, that I actually got in there and did it all.
I love that. That's so true. I think if you can get to as close to the end of your life, if we're all lucky enough to get to that point, 97-year-old, if you can look back with minimal regrets, or at least the regrets you've learned from and adapted moving forward for the latter part, I think, you know, it's such a, probably a cliche, but you know, you go to the grave happy, which I think is the best you can look for. But I think it's something that's worth checking in with. Again, checking in with your own mortality and realizing that life is going to pass, whether you want it to or not. And the days are going to pass, that you can either do it by being a people pleaser, something that I've had an issue with myself. You can do it living life on somebody else's terms, or you can decide what kind of life you want to live yourself and then go after that and feel fulfilled doing it. And I think checking in and realize that you're not going to get unlimited time. You have a certain amount of time on this planet. It's up to you to make the decision on how you want to live it, and then repeatedly reminding yourself of that so that you can feel motivated, you can feel fulfilled, and that you don't lose that desire because you jump up out of bed every day going after that life that you want.
So perfect. This has been so good today. I hope everybody got fired up from this. This is the kind of conversations I live for. You brought it so good today. So where can everybody get a hold of your book and reach you on social media?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Linda. Yeah, so my books are on Amazon. The Fitness Mindset, Rewire Your Mindset, my first two. My third one's out in December, January. So we're putting out a trifecta on that. So it's going well. And then Instagram, Brian_Keane_fitness, or the podcast, the Brian Keane podcast. So wherever anyone wants to follow me, I'm on everything: YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, the whole lot. So you put me into Google, everything comes up.
So amazing today. And lastly, what is your favorite quote to leave everybody something to go by that they can remember?
Successful people do the thing they have to do regardless of how they feel. It's a quote that my mentor gave me years ago, and I've spent years trying to cultivate the mindset to do the things I have to do regardless of how I feel, and the end product and the way that my life is as a result of cultivating that over the years.
So good. And it is, you're right. It is, regardless of how I feel, like, you know, when you get up in the morning and it's time for that workout at 5, mine's at 5:30 a.m. I know what I want. So I think about, how do I want to feel later? How do I want to feel later? Good that I got up and did my workout. I'm reaching towards my goals. And also, how do I want to feel 6 months from now? Like, think about how you want to feel later, not how you feel right now when you get up and you want to stay under the covers or whatever it is that you're going for.
I love that. It's like at the Aristotle, you are what you repeatedly do. Like, I think the habits play a role in our success and whatever it is we do. And as you said, how do you want to feel in 6 months? How do you want to feel in 3 months? How do you want to feel later in the day? Checking in with that. I absolutely love that, Linda.
So good. Well, I think that is a good note to end on. And it has been so great talking to you. I can't believe you're in the UK and here I am in Ohio, and we're having this fantastic fire breathing session today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Across the Atlantic. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much again, Linda.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat. Make sure to give Brian some love today. Bye, everybody.
Thanks again.